worker named John, black man, sharecropper. And John's boss, Mr. Williams, had just bought a big fancy radio station in Jackson. And he had some business friends with him. And he said, hey, I'm going to go out to my field and I'm going to get one of my stupid Negroes and I'm going to put them on the radio and it's going to be like Amos and Andy. It's going to be crazy and you're going to get a big laugh out of it. And so Mr. Williams, the plantation boss, goes and gets John and said, John, I'm going to take you downtown to my radio station and put you on the radio. And he said, well, why, boss? Why? And he said, well, because I want to hear your voice and you can say anything you want to on the radio. And he said, oh, you got to be kidding me, boss. No, I'm not kidding you. I'm coming to get you tomorrow, taking you downtown, I'll put you on the radio. So the next morning, the plantation owner drives out to get John, and they get to the radio station, and he's snickering. He goes in to his friends, and they say, hey, John's getting ready to go out there. He's going to make a fool of himself. This is going to be a real live Amos and Andy, right off the plantation. So John goes into the little studio booth, and he taps things. He says, here, I'm supposed to talk into this? And the plantation owner is waiting. I said, yeah, go ahead, start talking. John says, so I can say anything I want to, boss? When you turn it on, I can tell my wife how much I love her and tell my kids in Chicago that I'm missing them. He said, you can say anything. He said, no kidding. And he said, and the whole world's going to hear it? And he said, John, I told you everybody's going to hear it. He said, well, okay. He said, my name is John Stevenson. I'm being held against my will. Please come and get me. And I'm on the Eastern Plantation of Mississippi. Well, Thurgood Marshall, he was a great storyteller. Yes.
Speaking of Eastland,
Hank Klivenoff, by the way, Hank Klivenoff, who wrote the great book, The Race Beat, won the Pulitzer Prize. Great writer.
Jim Eastland fascinates me. He was obviously chairman of the Judiciary Committee, a late obstructionist, hardcore white supremacist. Both Kennedy had to get around him to get Marshall on the Third Circuit. Kennedy had to get around him to talk to us about Eastland.
Yeah, he was a rough character, born in Sunflower County, Mississippi. Eastland's father ran this plantation, and Eastland's father, Woods Eastland, it was Woods and James, two powerful brothers who ran this plantation. And one day they had both got word, and this story is told in the book. One day, both of the brothers had got word that there was a black man who they had kicked, a sharecropper who they had kicked off their land. But he had snuck back on because he was dating one of the women who lived in one of the shacks way back up in the woods. And so they went to throw him off. So this would be James Eastland, the senator. He was at the time 2 years old. And but his father and his uncle went to go get this black man. And when the black man looked out the window, he saw them riding hard toward him, and he knew something was going to happen. And so he grabbed his rifle. He opened the door, and there was a shootout. Woods Eastland was killed. The black man ran into the woods. He was on the run for 7 days. James Eastland's father, he caught him. And he was turned over to the authorities. The following night, James Eastland's father went to the jail, strong-armed the sheriff, snatched the man out of the jail, and sliced off his ears, his fingers, and then lynched him right there in this small town. Now this is the father of Senator Eastland. Now, not to tie Senator Eastland, yeah, he was just 2 years old, not to tie him into any of that, but that's the kind of psychology that he came up in his household, and it was, you know, I mean, that was a tough, it was a tough and scary time to grow up. Eastland was the son was a very unreconstructed, you know, rebel. You know, he always talked about the lost cause, and his son, James, the senator's son, went to Sidwell Friends High School in Washington, D.C. You all probably know this story. And as soon as the first black student attended Sidwell Friends, Eastland took his child out of the school and said, my child will not go to a school even with one black. So, yes?
This is so surreal being a student of history because you make things jump off the page. I can see it like a play if you describe what you read in the book. So I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
In this time we're living in, Austin, you said it, and I remember all these things from film, but give us a narrative, if you will, a brief one, about these times on the Supreme Court and the callous way that people talk about each other, it's so partisan.
Right now or then?
Right now.
Okay, yeah.
Because I see a return as the same kinds of rhetoric in a different form. And I'm not trying to be overbearingly liberal or anything. I just see the way that particularly these debates, it's like a circus.
Yeah.
Each vying for position. And with Trump being the ringleader. But nothing of substance. And
Right.
that was much like the time of the 60s and 50s. So how do you see the Supreme Court in these times we live in?
Yeah. Marshall's life on the Supreme Court was very painful to him, you know, those 24 years, you know, because the court had shifted to the right. And he didn't agree with anything, hardly, that happened under the Rehnquist court. And so he was very sad about that. I think that the whole judicial system in our country has to be re-examined. I think you look at Ferguson, and I think you have a situation where people would get traffic tickets and they would be forced to come to court, and it might be canceled for 2 or 3 straight days, and then they would lose their jobs. And so the whole system needs to be re-examined. The mass incarceration that we have in this country for minor offenses is almost criminal in itself. And there are people who need help, and they can get some counseling, but when you have private contractors getting a lot of money to build private prisons, we just had a prison riot in the state of Oklahoma where 7 people died, and that prison is run through contractors. And somehow that type of punishment and that type of situation has infected the whole system, state to state. And what I think goodness, we barely got juveniles to escape being put to death in this country. I mean, I think that passed the Supreme Court, but you know what, 7-2, that we were the last civilized nation willing to put a juvenile to death. It never happened, but it could have if the law hadn't been stamped out. So I think the whole system has to be re-examined. The whole system, top to bottom. I mean, you have judges, people who are rich who now can run for office for the Supreme Court. So you can buy your way onto some of these state Supreme Courts. That's not right either. I mean, so that, you know, does the person who, you know, who's making $15 an hour, you know, are they getting the right information to be able to make the best voting choice? You know, because they've been bombarded with somebody like a Trump, you know, that's just everywhere because of his, you know, his money, and no other reason, his money, that's it. And so, I think the country has some soul searching to do over these next years. Yes?
Could you talk about the years leading up to the nomination? Was there an expectation in the country about when is there going to be integration, or was this to some extent of, you know, out of the blue that LBJ came? Or was there times earlier in his administration or the Kennedy administration where it came close to being integrated, it just didn't happen?
Now, that's a great question, because here's what happened. In 1967, there was no vacancy on the court. None. LBJ said, my window might be short, so if I'm going to get a black man onto the court, then I got to strike now. So he went to see his friend, Tom Clark, who was one of the Supreme Court justices. They had known each other in their 20s in Texas. He convinced Tom Clark to step off the court. And he did it this way. He said, Tom, your son Ramsey, I'm going to appoint him to become Attorney General. And you know, Tom, there's going to be a conflict of interest. People are going to start saying, oh, that's nepotism, that's nepotism. So, Tom, I'm just asking you to do something for your country. And I know you love your boy. He's your only son. And what a great thing it'd be for him to be the Attorney General of these United States. Your boy, little Ramsey, who I used to hold in my arms. I'm getting ready to make him the Attorney General. And so Tom Clark was, wow, you know, well, isn't this a lifetime appointment? But LBJ convinced Tom Clark to step down. I interviewed Tom Clark's daughter, who said, it was so funny. Daddy was in great health. He had never talked about stepping down from the court. He had a great job. He loved it. And all of a sudden he came home and told Mom and me and my brother and my other sister that he thinks it's a good time to step off the court. And I tell that story in the book. And Lyndon Johnson sent Mr. and Mrs. Tom Clark on a fact-finding mission around the world, first class.